Yo, it's Mac from the Everyday Nobody's podcast. I know you see the title, so let's get straight to it. The boogeyman of podcasting is back. Taxstone. He made his appearance on Twitter Spaces, and he basically joined the Hate Avengers. He got with every op that Joe has ever had, and that goes from like 20 years ago up until now. He had Rocky, he had Rory, Maul, Danny from the Stop. I mean, anybody who's ever had something bad to say about Joe, he got with them to form the Hate Avengers. Tax is keeping that same energy that he had for Joe from back when he got locked up to their whole Twitter engagement. Like, he actually went out of his way to air everybody out. That went for Nori, Ish, Ice, Queens Flip, Flacco, Angela Yee. Anybody he had a problem with, he made sure that he addressed it on Twitter Spaces. It was a sight to see. Tax still seems to be in rare form. My only issue is it seemed like he hasn't learned anything since he's been in prison. Like, he's still using the same bully tactics that he was using before, which is anybody he doesn't like, he's just going to talk crazy about him. And hopefully nothing happens to him. I'm starting to think that if he didn't go to prison then, he'd probably still end up in prison now, or even worse. Nonetheless, I'm still entertained. He's still wilding out on people, and what makes it worse is he's supposed to be going up for an appeal. Now, if I was in that situation and I'm going up for an appeal, I would want to posture towards the courts to make them think I'm a decent human being. Instead, Tax is still getting out here going crazy. He's smoking weed. He's crashing out on people. And clearly he has a phone in there because he's on Twitter. Tax had a lot to say about Joe in particular, which kind of makes me afraid because no matter what you say, yes, he's in prison, but we also know that things still happen to people that Tax doesn't like, whether he's in prison or not. So I think Joe might be in danger.
I'm about to come home and y'all niggas is gonna be fucked up when I step in front of your face and shake y'all hand and grab your ass in front of your bitch and emasculate you.
For you.
That's what you're gonna be hurt at when that bad bitch is looking at you getting treated like a bad bitch. See, they'll get on the shit and say, yeah, Taxstone is stupid. He had a gun inside a nightclub. But then they'll say some crazy shit that'll make their ass have to need a gun in a nightclub. You understand? So it's like this. You got a random nigga punch Joe Budden in the mouth. I don't know that nigga that did that shit. That is a random nigga who liked my show. He actually DM'd me and said, y'all punch that nigga in the mouth because I don't like what he said about you. Now, the thing is this. I didn't even suggest nobody to beat your ass yet. I'd get your ass beat off a suggestion. I could say, yo, Joe Budden need to get fucked up and you'll start getting fucked up everywhere you go. You don't even realize that. But I don't got that type of hate in my heart. All I wanted that nigga to do was not speak about Combat Jack. The judge knew what he did with the sentencing. The sentencing was illegal. You can look the shit up. The nigga sentenced me concurrent. It was, consecutive. It was supposed to be concurrent because it happened in one room. It was not separate incidents. So he wasn't supposed to sentence me like that. So now they got to re-sentence me. So everybody that's being boisterous and brave, what I tell niggas is this. If you so smart, why don't you tell your lawyer, go look through my case before you get brave talking about you'll see me in 35 years. You might see me in 35 months, pussy.
But how do we even get here? To fully understand the story between Tax and Joe, we would have to go back to like 2015. They both started their podcast around the same time. Joe, he took the angle of, I'm the ex-rapper, ex-artist, musician, loving hip-hop guy who's kind of fed up. People will often think he's a hater, but really he just had a view behind the curtain of the music industry. Then you would have Tax. He's a street guy. He was the guy who liked to bully bullies. He would say, he's reformed because he had just got out. But if we're going to be honest, Tax was still on some bully tough guy stuff. If you was super masculine, tough, sold 1,000 bricks, hop out the car, do something, he was going to make sure to remind you that you was just a poet, beloved. Of the two, I must say Tax was far more entertaining. He would just roast people. He would roast people to death. That was like his nature, especially rappers. He loved to get under rappers' skin. Whereas Joe, he was kind of trying to find his footing, but around the same time, they both hit their stride. And, it was a good thing. It got so bad that the fans were starting to kind of want them to compete, want them to beef because they were in similar lanes. So the fans were trying to get them to go at each other. And if you're Joe, you're like, damn, I already got to deal with Charlemagne. That's his direct competition. Now he has to deal with Charlemagne's right-hand man, and he's super dynamic. So to put the fans at ease, Taxstone decided, I'll just invite Joe on my podcast. Kind of put the fans at ease, let them know, hey, there ain't no beef. We both are, sure, we're competition. Sure, I know y'all gonna be mad if he drops before me or if I drop before him, but nonetheless, it's just healthy competition. Now, we all know how that episode went. Joe came on the podcast And basically, Joe ended up getting kicked off by Tax because he really pissed Tax off. Contrary to how Tax tells the story, though, really, Tax was being a dickhead. Like, he came in there just immediately insulting Joe. He was talking about basically his fashion choices.
He got his pumpkin spice shirt on too. That's when you got pumpkin spice, that shirt. Nah, but anyway, let me just kick shit off.
You don't like my shirt?
No, Joe Budden. We don't like your shirt.
I like your shirt,
vest.
Joey.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with this nigga, man.
Nah,
I like the scarf.
He act like he's such
You're
a
not
fucking
going to see your grandmother.
fashionista.
I'm not. I wear the same shit every day.
Why you asking me about my fucking clothes?
You look mad comfortable, son. You look like you just left JCPenney with your grandmother and your great grandmother. Y'all went to the movies after the hit Red Lobster. that shirt, like. That's one thing I always admired about you, that you would you would do corny things like wear a vest.
Well, I was high out of my mind when I was wearing those
Why
vests.
did you wear that vest?
I was under a lot of drugs back then.
He was kicking him down because he lost in battle rap.
When Joe had the battle with Hollow, I always tell people, you lost that shit. You rap, but you lost that battle because of performance. You let the crowd deter you from what the fuck you was doing. You got mad at the crowd. I always tell people, do you feel like you won that battle?
Yeah.
Why?
He was calling Joe a manipulator. He was questioning all the women that Joe dates.
Joey's the type of guy that I think if we ever did have sex, I don't think our energy would change. I think he would still treat me the same way he treats me every other day.
Thank you,
know what I mean?
Do it.
Yeah, he
Right?
would. He would, because he loves women from third world
I'm a
countries.
come on.
Get off the stage.
I'm not certain how you conduct conversations normally.
That's what it is. You can't listen. You can't play that with me. I'm not none of your third world country bitches.
You can, just so we're clear, you have created a sentence and then begin to have conversations with yourself.
No, that's
about
you.
words
You
that were
can't.
never
No,
said.
don't do that to me.
I'm just telling you
keep trying
what's-
to tell you.
what's
I'm not
happening.
none of them bitches from the third world country. I really could read.
Yo, this
I really
nigga
can
is
comprehend.
killing Dominican bitches. He's
You
killing
understand?
y'all.
No, I'm not trying to kill Dominican bitches. I'm not, because I'm not even trying to kill females, because sometimes females they tend to fall for shit, and that's what Joe do to the girls. What I'm trying to tell you is, don't do it to me, beloved.
This guy, man.
But you know what I mean. I'm happy to be here with with rappers like Joe Budden, who put women on from third world countries.
Yo, Dominicans.
Why do you keep saying
getting
that?
killed?
Nah, because that's the ones I see. That's the ones I see. Like, I literally see. No one knew who Kaylin was. Everybody was joking on her about just being in the pool and shit. Next thing I knew, she had a twerk franchise. You know what I mean? She was getting booked. She was doing that. I was like, yo, Joe Budden really be doing a lot for the Dominican Republic, my nigga, more than Wyclef did for Haiti.
It's hard for me to gauge whether you're being condescending or whether you're being serious right now.
I'm being both. They should have never taught Joe Budden words.
Nah, he can articulate like a motherfucker.
Not articulate. He's the word semantic god.
He brought up the fact that Joe got punched in the face by Wu-Tang.
You know what it is? You've been getting away with murder ever since Wu-Tang snuffed you. You know what I mean? Who's from Wu-Tang snuffed you exactly?
Then Tax just went for the gusto, the super gotcha question. He was like, did you hit your girlfriend, Esther Baxter?
Did you beat the shit out of Esther Baxter?
No.
What did you do to her?
Nothing.
Did you sit on her and choke her?
No.
She said you sat under her breast. On her stomach.
I'm
and you
aware
choked her.
of what she said.
Did you do that?
No.
What did you do to her?
Nothing. Nothing at
She
all.
made up all of that.
We'd have to ask her. She's not present.
Oh, my God. This is the fuck I'm talking about. I asked the motherfucker, did she make up all that? He said we would have to ask her.
We would have to ask.
Subject alone, all we have learned today is that Joe Budden is a spin artist. And he can spin.
He might be a spin artist.
So you think he could dance?
What has gotten spun?
I don't
Sax has
know.
been
Think he
talking
could
to himself
dance.
for an hour. I've said
How?
less than 40 words my entire time here. What am I spinning?
He lying again. Look at him. Lying again.
I don't know.
You
man.
spent
is
however
Joe
much time you
Budden?
spent talking about this battle.
Yo, who is Joe
Then
Budden?
you bring up the Wu-Tang shit in a poor attempt to make me feel uncomfortable. And then after that, you bring up this domestic violence bullshit, none of which I'm responding to. You're basically being responsive to yourself. What am I spinning right now?
Because you're not fucking answering the questions. Of course you spinning. What do you mean? What are you spinning? You're spinning.
What question?
And it's like, who would even want to answer that question? And then by the end of it, Tax just said, you know what? Joe's a retard, and I ain't dealing with it, and he just kicks him off the podcast.
Right. How is this your friend?
What do you mean how?
You speak to this retarded nigga on a daily basis?
I don't speak to him on a daily basis. I don't think he's retarded. Though.
He's retarded.
He don't.
he's not.
And he's
He
using his
don't.
intellect.
He don't think I'm retarded neither. Though.
No, it's not.
He
No,
don't. He
really
don't think I'm
retarded. You're
retarded
smart,
either.
Now, when I first saw the podcast, I was like, damn, this is the most entertaining shit I've ever seen. Like, Tax was just frying Joe ass. But looking at it as a mature adult with adult eyes, I'm like, Tax was kind of just being an asshole. As much as I love Tax, I hate the way he tells the story because he almost makes it seem like Joe just wouldn't answer any questions. Really, what was happening is Tax was insulting him, being condescending. Joe would answer, but Joe does that thing where if he's uncomfortable with something, he'll answer it very monotone and he'll kind of weasel around it. But he's giving you a direct answer. It's just not the answer that you want to hear. And then when you're antagonizing him, he's not yelling, he's not screaming, flipping over tables. And that's really what Tax wanted. Because Tax ended up yelling like the whole last 20 minutes of the pod. And like I said, he was insulting him the whole time. Like, if you ever get a chance, go watch that episode again and tell me if you think what Tax did was professional. From asking all these gotcha questions, trying to get him jammed up, and just blatantly disrespecting him to his face. Ask yourself, if you were being interviewed, how would you react? Because we've seen interviews go left all the time. So would you have been cool with him just calling you a woman-beating, failed battle rapper, couldn't keep a deal, you can't dress, you a manipulator, all your women are young, all your women are from a foreign country? Like, would you be okay with that? I don't know. Anyway, Tax would kick Joe off the podcast, and that would start their issues. Now, down the line, when people would ask questions, they would ask Joe, hey, what's going on with Tax? And Joe would be like, hey, it's whatever. It's all love, no hard feelings. I do remember Tax speaking on the situation of Vlad, and he was like, basically telling that story, like, oh, yeah, I asked him a question 6 different times. He wouldn't answer. But nonetheless, he didn't really kick Joe's back, and he kind of left it at that Vlad interview. So now we have to fast forward to 2016, the tragic Irving Plaza shooting. Now, if you ask Tax, according to Tax, he was in there, he was chilling. I think he had just done an interview. He was in the green room. Troy Ave comes in with his bodyguard. They was on some bully tough shit. They basically tried to fight him. He wasn't having it. He pulled out. Shots were fired. Troy Ave's bodyguard was hit. Rest in peace. Troy Ave was hit, and then a woman was hit. We don't really know the full story because you really had to be there. Now, if you ask Troy, he said, streets is a myth. I'm telling, middle finger from the stand. And he doubled down on that streets is a myth thing. I think he made a whole album called New Pac or some shit, some goofy shit. But anyway, that was the story. And nobody fully knows what happened in that green room unless you're in that green room. Now, how does any of that affect Joe? Well, anytime Joe would have to bring up the fact that this happened in Irving Plaza, he would take that time to kick Troy Ave's whole back in.
I don't see how y'all start this with we come from where we come from and then lambast the guy for having a gun. I'm not on any side.
No,
I'm trying to objectively have the conversation.
I got it.
I'm not on the side. I think Tax should be home. I think Bangers should be alive. I think a lot of things should be different.
I agree with that.
I always thought you was a doof, just so I'm clear. I'm trying to have an objective talk, but I think you a doof, and that was the reason I always stayed away from goofy niggas like you, because you have to protect your energy. What? I'm sorry.
Why?
Because Troy Ave's a doof. He been a doof. He has been a doof for a long time. I'm on record with this. You know how I feel about it. It's a doof.
They always have
a goofy,
they've had it back and forth.
Goofy,
they've had a
doofy nigga. I feel like he is one of the biggest goofs that New York has produced. That's what I'm saying.
But do you feel
Troy Ave,
get low.
In closing, I still think you are one of the doofiest doofs in the universe. I want to be clear. And one thing I've learned from this whole debacle is all the people that I despise win in court.
Yo, well, I'm running a tally in my head. So
all the niggas I be wanting, they just go down.
Because if you know their history, Troy Ave and Joe Budden have never been cool. Like, Troy Ave can't wait to call Joe a junkie, and Joe thinks he's an idiot. Troy Ave has made some comments about mental health and all that. Joe didn't like that. So basically, anytime they had something to say about him, it was going to be the most negative thing possible. Meanwhile, Joe was just screaming free tax, free tax, free tax, free tax, free tax. So that's kind of how Joe gets tied into it. He basically chose a side. He said, I mess with Tax, so I'm going with Tax. Now, when Tax got locked up and Troy Ave was free, Troy Ave was basically going to every large platform that he could get on to try to tell his story and sway the narrative. First thing he wanted to make sure you knew was the streets was a myth and that he's telling. And basically he was telling his side of the story as if he was just this victim going to work and he didn't do anything. And he went on Breakfast Club. He went on Drink Champs. I think he linked up with Academics. I could be wrong on that, but anywhere that they would listen that had a large platform, Troy Ave was getting his chance to get his side off and sway the narrative. Now, little did we know, Joe was actually being Taxstone's mouthpiece. Like, we didn't know that from jail, Joe and Tax were texting, and basically Joe went out of his way to bring people on that could corroborate Tax's side of the story, because Tax couldn't fight fair. Like, he's in jail. His lawyer says, don't speak to anybody. So he needs these platforms to speak for him, and Joe was one of them. If you really go back and think about it, Tax had Joe Budden, because like I said, Joe Budden was kicking Troy Ave's back in, and he was screaming free Tax every chance he got. He had Charlemagne. Even though Troy Ave was on Breakfast Club, Charlemagne didn't show up to work on those days because he's like, no, Tax is my man. And then he had Vlad. You already know Vlad is screaming free Tax every chance he get. He even went at it with Math Hoffa over Tax and Troy, because Math messed with Troy, Vlad messed with Tax, and they just could not find a common ground on that. So it would kind of throw Joe off when Taxstone was tweeting from prison, kicking Joe's back in, because he's like, dang, I used my platform to support you the whole time you were going through trial. So it's like, now that it didn't work out and you got convicted, now you're talking crazy about me. Like, where does this even come from? Well, it would all start from that damn complex hip hop power ranking list. It had Joe Budden at number 1, and it had 24 other losers. I'm bullshitting, but that is the truth. It was Joe at number 1, Ak at number 2, Charlemagne at number 3, Gilly and Wallow at number 4, and then Nori at number 5. I think the list was pretty accurate, if you ask me. Like, if we're going off public consensus, I think they got it right. But boy, did that start a podcast war. Everybody at that point who had a mic was basically going at Joe's head. That went for dude from Rap Radar, Charlemagne, Rory, Maul, Gilly, Wallow, and even Taxstone, to Joe's surprise. So obviously, you know, Joe was going to talk his shit. And then on the next pod, he was going to have to address everybody who was talking shit about him. And basically he took the subliminal angle, even though it was very, very direct. We know exactly who he's talking about. And one of those people who caught a stray, if you want to call it a stray, because it's, like I said, it was pretty direct, was Taxstone. On episode 616, To Whom It May Concern, Joe Budden, I would say he was pretty fair in his judgment, and he didn't go super hard, but he definitely gave Tax some bars, and he told him, hey, if you want to be number 1, this is like the basic criteria. This is what you got to do if you want to be in my spot. And one of those things is you can't be in prison. So Joe was started off by just reading Tax's tweet.
Tax, complex ass Tax. Where are you with Joe Budden? Always a good question to ask. What have you thought about his rise and leaving? And he said, I think finally figured out that Joe was a master manipulator. They were suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, and Joe manipulates everybody around him. Even the dudes sitting with him now are being manipulated. But you gotta understand, some people are all right with manipulation, as long as they get something out of it. So I think them dudes know that. But I think they just cool with the situation. Sometimes people don't got nothing going on in their life. They need to be a part of something. I'm not one of those people. I always tell people, if everybody jump on that ship, it's gonna sink. So I'm always the person that's like, I'm gonna stay with the land. When y'all get over there, y'all write me and tell me what happened. I don't jump on ships. I'm like a home ranger. I'm not the person that's trying to be cool with artists so I can try and get an interview. If I genuinely like you, all right, enough.
He read it, he digested it, and then he went off. Now, after reading Tax's tweet, I will say that kind of came off as the same old hate that Tax has always had for Joe, and it was pretty unwarranted. Tax would say that nobody on Joe's podcast has anything going on, and I don't really agree with that. Like, if you look at Parks, he was nominated for a Grammy. He's still engineering and producing. You look at Melissa Ford, she still had her side gigs going on. She's a dog owner, and she's got movies on Lifetime going on. You look at Queen's Flip, he still has his own show that's running, and he's still doing skits and everything. You look at Ish, nothing's really changed for him. He's still selling houses. Ice still collects electronics, and Ice even scored a caffeine deal where he was doing live streaming. So I don't get where Tax was coming from when he made that statement, basically saying that nobody else is doing anything. You know, it just came off as old school hate. So Joe would basically respond to Tax, for you to do this, you need to be free.
Well, like, to whom it may concern out there, because number one, can't go back and forth with people. Like, let's just start there. So I can't do and I don't want to give anybody's name any added value and equity. So to whom it may concern out there, a big part of this thing is being free. A big part of this is staying away from some of those spots where it might get a little thick at. A big part of this is knowing when and when not to be home and away from shit. A big part of this is getting out of your own way, because as humans, we come with shortcomings and deficiencies, and you want to hide your weaknesses and expose your strong suits. That's very important in podcasting game. Take that from numero uno, number one. That's not even on page one. See, and that's my problem with niggas that get to talking about podcasting. Y'all don't even be talking about shit that's on page one of the pamphlet or on the back of the book in the paragraph. Y'all not even in the bookstore yet. You can't steal second base and keep your foot on first. You have to get out of your own way. You have to constantly reinvent, and you have to be available for the miracle. You have to be available for the miracle, or else niggas would just be calling and mailing, and you talking from jail.
Now, what would make this situation even worse is about a week later, Joe would go on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast with Gilly and Wallow. Now, as far as for the culture, I felt like this was a good move, because Joe and Gilly have been talking about fighting and all kind of shit, because they really wasn't seeing eye to eye at that time. So to see them two come together was cool. As far as the actual episode, that shit was a dumpster fire. From Gilly trying to do his best Taxstone impression, just being antagonizing and obnoxious the whole time, to them stupid ass ads that are in the middle of the fucking podcast. New Amsterdam vodka, all that stupid shit. Like, that shit was annoying. So overall, I would say it was probably like a 5 out of 10 if we're talking about the actual substance of the podcast. But there were some okay moments. Now, even though Gilly was annoying, he was able to instigate that Tax and Joe beef just a little more. How he did that? Wallow asked a very harmless question. He said, hey, who was your influence? Tell me your story of what led up to you getting into podcasting and who influenced you into doing this. Before Joe could even spit a name out, Gilly was like, Tax, tell him how Taxstone raised you, blah, 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 blah. And Joe had to basically explain to Gilly, look, Tax was not an influence of mine. My influence was Combat Jack. Combat Jack had the vision. Tax couldn't influence me because Tax was a worker.
Okay, now the pivot. Now, when did it really start when you said, you was doing the shows? I mean, when did you say, I'm jumping up in this? Did somebody give you the game about this podcast shit or whatever? Or was you just like, I'm just doing it from off of seeing what I'm seeing out going on?
Taxstone gave him the game.
You're not your fucking. Yo, don't make me get animated in here.
Dog, get animated, nigga. Taxstone ain't give you the game. Nigga, I don't want no fucking nice, cool podcast. I don't know why Wallow in here like he a fake ass Brian Gumbo.
I'm trying to be.
Fuck bitch ass nigga. You's a, first of all, who gave you the game? Who gave you the game? You's a bitch ass nigga. Joe Budden's here. He's, so Joe, let me just ask you this question.
I'm trying to hear this shit. I'm trying to hear this shit,
fuck out of here.
I'm trying to hear this shit.
Shout out to all the podcasters.
Who gave you the game, though?
Rest in peace.
Taxstone, nigga.
Everybody did it, though.
Oh, so he said everybody. You can't.
Everybody that was trying to maneuver in the space. I mean, it started with Combat Jack for me.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, Combat was a legend.
Him and Pete is probably at the top of the start of where that list starts.
It did Taxstone.
Pete, Juan, Well, no. Why you keep naming workers? That's why we can't have the right conversation. You keep naming workers. And
What do you mean workers?
I'm not a worker.
No, I said Taxstone gave you some game on the podcast.
He couldn't give me the game I was looking for because he was a worker. I was talking to the people running the network.
Who was running the network?
Combat Jack.
Oh, Combat Jack. All right,
his partner.
And that was exactly what Gilly was looking for. He was just like, I need Joe to say something even remotely disrespectful about Tax, and that's going to set this shit ablaze. And boy, did it set shit ablaze. Tax would again angrily tweet Joe, and he would go the fuck off. And then Joe said, you know what? I've had enough. I'm not about to keep addressing this, but I'm about to go nuclear. And Joe went the fuck off. On episode 656, The Docket, Joe puts on a clinic. And he basically tells Tax, this is how I really feel about you, and this is how I've always felt about you. See, before, I was shaking hands because I didn't really want to see you in prison. But now, since you want to keep tweeting, I'm going to show my ass now. Now, for this topic, I want to slow walk it because there was a lot that was said, and I want to hear Joe's side. I want to hear Tax's side, and I want y'all to decide. Was Joe being a little too offensive? Was Tax being a hater? How do y'all actually feel? Is there credence on each side? Let's get to it. First, Joe starts the pod off by reading Tax's tweet.
Taxstone says, weak men only have aggressive ways with the weak, or who they've deemed weak, either family, kids, cripples, women. I'm going to give you a lesson in weak men with strong personalities. Joe Budden, for instance, clear weak man, only feels comfortable around stupid women or submissive friends. If you can't challenge Joe Budden mentally, you can't be his best friend. Anyone to challenge his Machiavellian ways can't be amongst him. So if you see people hanging around Joe, just know they're piss dumb or as feeble as Mitch McConnell. Every time a man steps to Joe for something disrespectful, he says, he folds like a lawn chair. Clear indication of bullying tactics that go wrong. Then he tries to clear it up with miscommunication. See, because when I speak to these dudes in private, they love me. Then on podcasts, it's always something negative to say, but only because I'm not around. I never knew some of these people had issues with me until 7 years of being away, but I'm pussy. I got jumped by nerds in the courtroom. Outside the courtroom, then on podcasts, I don't even know what I did to these niggas. Putting up with ways you don't agree with is a form of Stockholm Syndrome. Ice and Ish somewhere crying to each other about Joe, but pulling up to a podcast together and smoke hookah in solidarity. End quote.
All right, let's stop it right there. Because if you ask me, what Tax is saying right now is some real hater shit. So from there, Joe's going to break down every way that he feels like Tax is a small, weak man.
I also want to let people know that I have been nothing but supportive to this gentleman. I've given the benefit of the doubt. Free Tax. At some point, Tax hit me to have Vito on my podcast because Vito would corroborate his story when it seemed like he was in need of some help during the trial. He asked me to do that favor. I allowed Vito to come up here. Typically not someone I would have up here, but I did. He didn't corroborate anything, and that was the end of that.
So at this point, we have proof. We have proof that Joe went out of his way to help somebody who he's not even really friends with. He met like 4 times, but he went out of his way to be the mouthpiece for Tax while he was in prison. He brought Vito on, and, it didn't really help, but at least he made the offer. But then Joe would go on and tell us a story that we've never heard about when him and Tax had their first encounter on tax season.
When I came to do Tax's podcast, Tax had a gun on him. And then he passed that gun off to somebody, and then that person went and scurried to another room.
I thought that was weak. I said to myself, why the fuck does somebody need a gun to do a podcast? And secondly, why do you need a gun to interview me? I'll allow a brief moment of silence right here so the audience can pick up on what's blasphemous about both of those statements anyway. You guessed it. Why do I even know that you have a gun on you if you got one?
Now, Tax claims that shit never happened. He did not have a gun. But I kind of don't know what to believe because there was a comment made on that Tax season episode where Tax says something kind of indicating that he may have had some clips on him, some magazines or something like that. So, you know, I'll kind of leave that open to interpretation.
You got way too many zippers on them jeans to be talking about my shirt for this long.
Listen, I ain't mad at you, beloved.
You got like
I'm really using these compartments. I got magazines that you can't read in here now. Nah.
Then Joe would go forward talking about the opportunities that were granted. I'm not really sure what he means by he was Charlemagne's lackey or whatever he said, because I don't know if he's referring to the fact that Tax was kind of being a henchman for Charlemagne, because he kind of was, or if it's the fact that Tax was telling these outlandish ass stories, basically proving how tough he was. I don't know where Joe was going with that, but he thought that was weak.
Then Charlemagne granted you an opportunity, and I watched you get sunned out. I thought it was super weak, but hey, to each his own. Either he totally lost his backbone or now we both have scoliosis. But boy, did you get to shucking and jiving and dancing. I thought that was weak.
Then Joe would go on talking about this fight that he had. I kind of do remember Tax tweeting about it, saying something to the extent of, man, that boy Joe Budden, he really got hands because he beat my mans up, and I know I can't beat my mans up, so I ain't even trying to fight Joe, or something to that extent. So yeah, I understand why Joe think is weak, because nobody knew about that fight, so why were you in a rush to get that information out? It's kind of weak.
Then me and your man got it on around the corner. Shout out to him, salute. You got to come up here still. And the very next morning, you was on Twitter divulging every single detail of that dance like you was fucking Lisa Evers. I thought it was weak.
Then Joe would explain how he felt like Tax was foul anyway for bringing a gun in the club. I don't personally like that take, because if somebody's trying to harm me, I don't see nothing wrong in you defending yourself, especially if they're trying to jump you. So I didn't really jive with what Joe was saying, but it is what it is. Joe thought it was weak. What I do know is we only saw Troy Ave with a gun shooting in that green room, so we can't really speak to who shot the woman for sure. We know it only makes sense that if Tax is fighting Troy and his bodyguard, it makes sense that those two would be shot. But that other woman who was shot, we don't know who did that. So I ain't really like Joe taking that angle. That was kind of nasty.
You pulled that little gun in a small, crowded room, endangering the lives of moms, dads, uncles, all of the people in there. I thought it was weak. You murdered a good man, and you shot a good woman. Shout out to her.
Then Joe would get into the fact that all this kind of started because Tax was pestering Troy Ave. I do think Tax had some validity in what he was saying, where he was like, hey, I'm a podcaster. I speak about people for a living, so you can't assault me for my words. And then there was the whole Manolo Rose thing where Troy Ave kind of snaked his song from him. I get Tax being upset about that. But as far as the tweeting, like, I think it was documented, Taxstone tweeted at Troy Ave about 500 times, which does come off a little obsessive and maybe some hate. But it's not for me to judge. Nonetheless, Joe thought that was weak.
You online stalked Troy Ave for years. For years. I just don't know real niggas to move that way, but hey, maybe you was making up your own rules.
Joe basically explained to Tax, all that bully shit that you had gotten away with before, this is where it did not serve you. And so you really need to think about what you've done. And then Joe kind of touched on his worker comment when he was on $1 million worth of game.
And then you got the nerve to be mad
that I went on Gilly and Wallow's podcast and said that my inspiration was Combat Jack and that I didn't pull much inspiration from you because you are a worker. You niggas be sensitive and mad at my honest truths. Rest in peace to Combat Jack, iconic legend. It's my man and I miss him. But that's who I was talking to. And you were indeed a worker. You were working for Loudspeaker. That's back when y'all was running around saying that y'all got, what was y'all so happy about? 15% of the ad money that y'all was getting when Loudspeaker was taking 30 to 40% off the top. Y'all was excited about it. That screamed worker to me. You were a worker for Loudspeaker. You are a worker for depopulation. You're now a worker for the state. You are a worker for Black Death. And still somehow you have the audacity to be in there focused on and talking about everybody but you, which is where I get befuddled at, because the judge gave you 35 years, not for the crime. People have done worse and gotten less. He gave you a stupid ass 35 years so you could sit there and fucking think. So you could just say to yourself, yo, I earned this.
Then Joe would really, really try to cut deep, and he would basically say, look, Tax, you just a hater. You're jealous because everybody who you hated on is doing better than you. That go from Math to Joe, Gilly, Wallow, Charlamagne. Everybody that you had something negative to say about is now doing better than you because you're in prison, tweeting. And you're still bringing up old complex lists where they actually had you higher than Joe at the time. But that was like 8 years ago.
Now over for the Tax brought the streets to podcasting. No. The streets took you from it. It's a bitter, bitter taste having to watch niggas like me and Gilly and Wallow and Nori and Math have all of this success out here while you post these 2016 polls. But sit with that. Embrace that cinnamon challenge. It's bitter, I know. But the last thing you need to be worried about is what anybody else is doing. I think it's weak. I think you're weak. I think you've always been weak. And some of the things that I think is dope, like freedom, like being there for your parents, for your family, for your kids, for your children, buying real estate, setting up trust, the 401k shit. I was just talking about sports earlier with my little brother. I think all that shit is fly. And all of you pretend wannabe pseudo street niggas, maybe you wouldn't understand it. So as you age in there, you should think about all of these things. This has been the pattern for about 15 years now. A short, fragile, height-deprived, insecure nigga doing his best to overcompensate. And why do you ask niggas for favors that you feel this way about? I think that's weak too.
Then Joe would basically finish off with saying, and he asked a really valid question. If you hated me so much and you felt this way about me this whole time from 2015 all the way till now, why do you choose to reach out to people like that? Why would you reach out to me to support you while you're in prison, and then when it doesn't go well, you kick my back in? Like, I think that's weak. That's how Joe felt. He was like, that shit is weak. Don't think these horrible things about me and then ask me for help when you're in need. Then Joe would pretty much finish the episode by saying, suck my dick. A lot. He said that a lot. And basically, don't drop the soap. And when you see me in 35 years, if you still mad, activate. Pick up your cane and let's get to swinging. Then Joe said, look, I'm not going to talk about Tax no more. This will be my final time addressing him. But then something kind of happened that made Joe have to address him again. 2 months later, Joe would be in the club, just chilling, vibing, and then he gets punched in the face by some random dude who just loved Tax. And that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say you should never underestimate Tax. Not that Tax had anything to do with it, but it seems like whether Tax is outside or inside, he could be harmful to your life. On episode 673, Clout Rules Everything Around Me, Joe would basically do the whole podcast with a hand wrap, and he would explain what happened the night he got punched.
So I get up,
and I walk through a crowd, bust a left. Remember, that's where the crowd is. And just at some point, a nigga with a mask pop up, and he cocked all the way back. Like, all the way back. Like, you see them niggas with the punching machine with the bag when they be trying to, that little nigga cocked all the way here and said, bow! And the whole club said, oh! And I was like, oh, somebody getting, oh, shit. It's me.
Oh. Joe will make light of it. You know, of course he's going to make jokes, but he said, even in that pod, I know who did this. I know who sent this. It's a person that I told could suck my dick. And he said they could still suck my dick. Clearly he was talking about Tax. Like we all know, he went on to suck my dick spree in that last episode. So we know exactly who he's talking about. But if we didn't know, we would find out, because the guy who punched Joe in the face got an interview, which is crazy because he's like not a rapper, he's a nobody, but he gets an interview explaining the night that he punched Joe in the face. The guy would even say in the interview, I don't even know Tax. I just did that shit because I love Tax. I love his podcast, so I punched Joe in the face.
Was me grabbing him up and God. So that's what's the I just popped, and you know, he dazed. Like, you know, it's like he fell asleep standing up, and then he just woke back up. Oh, I didn't even know. I guess he said, I didn't know who got hit. We said, he said, I didn't even know.
He said he didn't even know he got hit.
He said, I didn't know who got hit. And then I realized, oh, it's me who got hit. He fell asleep standing up, and then he woke back up. It wasn't really like that. It was like, them dudes know. They got a lot of help from that man too. Like, you know, that man really mentor a lot of people, you know? Yeah. In the good way too, not even on no crab in a barrel shit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So from what I've seen, shout out to Taxstone. I don't know him.
Luckily, no podcasters were severely hurt in the running of that fade. So basically, after that, anytime you would see Joe's name in the headlines, you would see Taxstone tweeting, basically calling him an abuser, manipulator, all the stuff that he's been saying about him. You would just see more of that. So now we fast forward to about 3 weeks ago. Tax would get on Twitter Spaces and he would just start airing shit out. Tax would even start to refute some of the things that Joe Budden had said about him. And he kind of just wanted to make some things clear. But before we get to that, I want to touch on the main reason why Tax claims he hates Joe.
And I'm mad because I tell a nigga, do not talk about my friend. My friend is dead. And when my friend was alive, you never spoke ill of him. And you was trying to get a job for my friend for years, trying to get a job. And I could be honest and tell people like, yo, the real shit was that he didn't take it at first because he didn't want the rest of the crowd that he had. When he had Joe Buttons and Marissa Mendez, that's when it was called, I'll name this podcast later.
The friend that Tax is referring to is Combat Jack. Combat Jack, he had Loudspeakers, which was basically a large conglomerate that had podcasts on it. So it had Brilliant Idiots, it had Tax Season, among other ones. Rest in peace, Combat Jack passed away, which is why Tax didn't really like Joe speaking on him. Now, before Combat Jack ran Loudspeaker, he was an entertainment lawyer. He was Nori's entertainment lawyer, and I guess he messed up on Nori's first record contract. He messed up the publishing or something. Nori has been outspoken in saying that, hey, Combat Jack jerked me. He even went on to bring Combat Jack on Drink Champs, and he said it again. He was like, yo, you jerked me. Combat Jack was like, hey, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. But Nori still wouldn't let it go. Combat hated that Nori kept bringing that story up. He hated that while he was alive. So, of course, Tax isn't going to take kindly to that while Combat Jack is deceased also.
You know what I'm saying? I got to give a shout out to, where else did I go? Oh, Miami. I got to give a shout out to Drink Champs. Nori and DJ EFN. We did a classic episode with Jack Thriller with special features from Damon Dash and 2 Chainz. But I was really upset again, Nori. Like, we how many times we going to piece this shit out? And then you on Breakfast Club saying I jerked you again, nigga. Like, and then Charlemagne, my nigga, like, stop, yo, nigga.
Charlemagne's the antagonist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I heard Combat Jack jerked a lot of niggas, man. Jerk these nuts, my nigga.
But what does that have to do with Joe? I would love to play the clip, but it's a Patreon exclusive where Joe Budden had Nori on. And really, it wasn't Joe that was violating. It was really Nori was violating everybody who was getting jerked on their ad money because Nori's basically boasting that, yo, I'm re-rocking the same content and getting paid for all of it, where everybody else, they just gave their ad money away. And some of those people who fell under that was Taxstone. Joe didn't really even speak ill of Combat Jack, but he was instigating the shit because he got a kick out of Nori just going in on everybody. But if you watch the clip again, it's not Joe speaking bad on Combat at all. But I could definitely understand why Tax would be upset because Combat is not here to defend himself, so Taxstone is from Joe. When Joe was talking his shit, he was really talking about Complex because Complex basically tried to keep Everyday Struggle going, even though Joe was the one who created the IP. And they also tried to basically redo the same content but add Gilbert Arenas and make it a sports podcast. Joe didn't like that because he's like, if I created it, when I quit your show, I should take my IP with me. You shouldn't be able to just use my shit. Complex did. They had academics on there. They had Star. They had Wayno, and they kept Nadeska. So that's really what Joe was referring to. He never mentioned Combat Jack. He only speaks highly of Combat Jack. But Tax would refute all the claims that he needed Loudspeaker and basically he was getting jerked out of ads because he said, hey, I only work with Loudspeakers for 4 months. Everybody didn't know that, but he was an independent contractor after the 4 months because Combat Jack says he's too much of a hazard.
You never did better numbers than me. I got ads before you. Y'all niggas started falsifying y'all ads, and this is real talk. Tristan Walker, them niggas will tell on that. Nori, all of them was faking their numbers because they said, Tax, how the fuck are you selling 300 razors and these niggas is selling 20? And they talking about they got 1 million views on their show and they got 1 million followers. I said, I'm not here to tell you that, man. Those is good dudes. And I left it alone like I knew nothing was going on. But this is why Nori not on CBS now, because they was there faking their numbers at CBS. The first couple episodes, they acting like they got fucking 2 million fucking hits and shit, and the CBS found out and they ain't want to pay up. Right. And you sitting here talking about me like I'm some ignorant dumb nigga. Nigga, I was not even on Loudspeaker Network after the first 4 months, and nobody knows that. I was just using them to get ads. They felt from back then, they say, yo, Tax, you be wilding, you be disrespecting a lot of dudes. Dudes was calling the studio, threatening people at the studio, talking about, yo, we gonna come up there and shoot y'all because of Taxstone. And this is before any of this other shit happened with this rapper dude. Niggas was just doing it because they didn't like the way I was talking about their music. So right then we did a contract where I got out of the contract I was in with them. So I was independent my whole fucking time niggas was listening to me. They just didn't know. And I'm not lying, Chris Martin.
Then he would kind of address Joe saying that he put everybody in danger by even having a gun. And Tax would say, well, we all say stuff that may require us to have a gun, but then you tell me, why couldn't I just get punched in the face? Tax don't see how that even makes sense.
See, they'll get on the shit and say, yeah, Taxstone is stupid. He had a gun inside a nightclub. But then they'll say some crazy shit that'll make their ass have to need a gun in a nightclub. You understand? So it's like this. You got a random nigga punch Joe Budden in the mouth. I don't know that nigga that did that shit. That is a random nigga who liked my show. He actually DM'd me and said, y'all punch that nigga in the mouth because I don't like what he said about you. Now, the thing is this. I didn't even suggest nobody to beat your ass yet. I'd get your ass beat off a suggestion. I could say, yo, Joe Budden need to get fucked up and you'll start getting fucked up everywhere you go. You don't even realize that. But I don't got that type of hate in my heart. All I wanted that nigga to do was not speak about Combat Jack.
Then Tax would finish off his sermon by saying, hey, all y'all who are talking shit, just know I might be home sooner than you think. So when I see you, you better be on that. You better keep that same energy because I heard everything.
I'm about to come home and y'all niggas is gonna be fucked up when I step in front of y'all face and shake y'all hand and grab y'all ass in front of your bitch and emasculate you. For you. That's what you're gonna be hurt at when that bad bitch is looking at you getting treated like a bad bitch. The judge knew what he did with the sentencing. The sentencing was illegal. You would look the shit up. The nigga sentenced me concurrent. It was consecutive. It was supposed to be concurrent because it happened in one room. It was not separate incidents. So he wasn't supposed to sentence me like that. So now they got to re-sentence me. So everybody that's being boisterous and brave, what I tell niggas is this. If you so smart, why don't you tell your lawyer, go look through my case before you get brave talking about you'll see me in 35 years. You might see me in 35 months, pussy. So
now you tell me, was Tax just a hater? Is Joe a manipulator? Was he going too hard on Tax? Was Tax being fake for wanting to even work with him, even though he's never liked Joe? I mean, tell me what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. I'm out.